This video will continue Chapter 8, talking about inversions of dominant seventh chords. So we have two different systems that we'll look at in how to name these dominant seventh chords. Okay? So the first one we'll look at is the figured bass dominant 7 chord nomenclature. So the first, let's go to our manuscript paper and let's just look at a couple of these. Okay. I'm just going to do it in treble clef, and we'll just start with our G major, our G dominant seventh chord in the key of C, right? So we've got key of C major, we've got our 5/7 in root position, and that's how we name it. Now, when we are, remember that when we do our figured bass, the Roman numeral refers to what? That is the root of the chord, right? And the numbers refer to the inversion. Okay, so let's just remember that the Roman numeral refers to the root of the chord, and the Arabic numerals refer to the inversion. So let me just do it down here again. We've got that C major. We'll do our G dominant seventh chord, and I'm going to do something here. We're used to seeing 5/7 like this, but really what that means, if you remember from figured bass, is that you have a seventh above the bass, right? Here's our G to our F, that's a seventh. But also implied in this, 7 is just shorthand for all of the intervals above the bass, just like we did with our triads. So what else do we have above the bass here? We've got a fifth above the bass, right? The G to the D. And above the bass here, we've got a third. Okay? So we'll call this the full figured bass. And this is the abbreviated up here, right? That's our shorthand. And that's what keyboard players back in the day used to, that's what they would see, and then they would know, oh, if I've got a G in the bass line, and then I've got these notes above, there's a third, fifth, and a seventh, then I know that those are the notes of the chord. Okay? So let's do another inversion here. Let's make the third in the bass here. And I'm going to put the G up here, the root. Okay? So here's our bass note, but here is our root. Right? If we stack it so that we stack this so that there aren't any empty lines or spaces. Okay? This, we've got it right next to each other, so we could say that the G actually comes down here and acts as the root. Well, we've got the root up here, and what do we have in the bass? We've got the third. But still, it's still a 5/7 chord, so let's do the 5 here. And what intervals do we have above the bass? We've got a third, we've got a fifth, and a sixth. Okay, so we've got a third, a fifth, and a sixth above the bass instead of a third, a fifth, and a seventh. So let's hold off, and I'll show you what we call that. Now let's go one more inversion. Let's go D, and I'm going to bring it down an octave actually. D, F. Here's our G, our root, and our. We need what do we need? We've got a G, B, D, and we're missing a B, so let's put a B here. Okay, so now this is the same chord, right? We've got, and then it's all the same notes, and then down here we've got the D, F, G, B, all the same collection of notes. We've just ordered them in a different way. The G is still the root, so that's still a 5 chord. But what intervals do we have above the bass? We've got a third, a fourth, got a fourth, and a sixth. Okay, so those are the intervals that we have above the bass. Let's do one more inversion. Start with the F this time. F, G, B, D. Okay, So let's see what intervals. That's still a 5 chord. We've still got the same collection of pitches. G is still the root. So that's a 5. Now what do we have above the bass? We've got a second, a fourth, and a sixth. Okay, so these are the full figures for this figured bass. Well, and you can write those, but the system has created kind of a shorthand, just like we did with our other inversions. Remember, with a first inversion triad, we just call it a 5-6. With a second inversion triad, we call it a 6-4. Well, we've got these other intervals now because we've got the seventh here. So what we do is we call the root position of 5-7. It's actually pretty easy. This first inversion is a 6-5. We just lop off the 3. And then the second inversion we call a 4-3, 5-4-3. We lop off the third again. And then the third inversion we call a 4-2. Okay, so 7, 6-5, 4-3, 2 is how I remember it. And that gives you the inversions of your 5-7 chord, of your dominant 7th chord. And any 7th chord actually has these same things. Okay, so let's just try one really quick in a different key. I'm going to give you one, and then we'll just identify it. So I'm going to do it in bass clef here. And let's put it in the key of 2 sharps. C sharp, E, G, A. Okay, so here's our chord. Where is our root? Well, when you've got it stacked like this, it's pretty easy to find the root. You look for this second here, right? This interval of a second. And the top note is always going to be the root. And the bottom note is always going to be the 7th. Okay, so our A is our root, and in the key of D, D, F sharp, A, that's our 5 chord. And what pitch do we have in the bass? Well, it's a C sharp, and with a 5 chord, in the key of D, A, C sharp, E, C sharp is the third, so that's the first inversion. So that would be a 5-6-5. Okay? So that's how we do it in figured bass. When we analyze the 5-7 chords, we look for we've got to find the root, and then we find what inversion it is, depending on what the bass note is. Let's just use chord symbols now to identify these. So this would be a G7. There's 2 different systems now. G7. This would be a G7 still. All of these are G7s, but now we have an alternate bass note, so we say G7 over B. This is still a G7, but we do it G7 over D, whatever is in the bass. And this would be a G7 over F sharp, or just F, sorry, in the key. What would this one be? Well, it's an A7 chord, right? A7, but what's in the bass? C sharp. So we use slash chords to show inversions in chord symbols. That explains how to do 5-7 chords and their inversions in figured bass, Roman numeral figured bass, and chord symbols.